Welcome to Heartbreak Chronicles. The windows were slightly open, the muslin curtains swaying gently in the October breeze. I stood quietly on the second floor of the house next door, the binoculars in my hand focused precisely on the window of my former home, my former bedroom, to be exact. At the moment, it's just in time to see Meredith and the man cuddling in our bed. That's my bed, my house, my wife. Now, it's as if all of that has become what was. It's a strange feeling, like watching a movie about my own life, but as if it doesn't matter. My name is Bryant Myers. I'm 38 years old, and I was the owner of that house 3 weeks ago, the woman's husband. Now I'm the next door neighbor, a silent observer. I put down the binoculars and walked to my desk to record the time and things I saw in a well-prepared notebook. It's day 8, and I've collected enough data. People always say revenge is a dish to be eaten cold. I, on the other hand, am chilling this dish to the perfect temperature. How did everything come to this? I've asked myself this question countless times. Meredith and I met at an oil industry seminar 7 years ago. At the time, I was a geological exploration specialist for a Texas oil company, and I was often required to travel to various oil fields for fieldwork and data analysis. On that day, she was responsible for the organization of the entire event as a professional conference coordinator. She has impressive organizational skills and a beauty that's hard to ignore. Dark brown curly hair, turquoise eyes, and that air of softness and competence. After the meeting, I summoned up the courage to ask her to dinner, and to my surprise, she readily agreed. The conversation that night started with the topic of professions and quickly turned to our respective lives and dreams. She told me that she enjoys organizing events because she loves the process of transforming chaos into order, and I shared my obsession with geology and how I find hidden energy treasures by analyzing the structure of the Earth. Our relationship is growing fast. 6 months later, I asked her to marry me. Another 6 months later, we had a simple but cozy wedding. During a new marriage, everything is full of hope and promise. We bought this house in Houston and planned to settle down here and even discussed the possibility of having children. But the realities of life soon became apparent. My job requires long hours of field exploration, usually 2 weeks away and 1 week at home, sometimes even longer. Understanding this at first, Meredith was career-minded herself and gradually made the transition from conference coordinator to a successful corporate event planning consultant, helping all kinds of companies organize in-house training and large-scale conferences. But as time went on, communication between us became less and less, and the bonds of affection began to loosen. When I was out of town, our calls got shorter and shorter, and the content became more and more focused on day-to-day minutiae. My time home has become a make-up period, trying to make up for those days of absence in just a few days. I would bring back gifts, arrange weekend trips, or just be there for her as much as I could. But none of these efforts seemed to be enough to fill the cracks caused by the long separation. Beginning in the 3rd year, arguments became frequent. Most arguments start small, but always quickly escalate into fundamental questions about each other's lifestyles. Meredith started complaining that I was putting too much energy into my work, and I felt aggrieved. Wasn't my hard work for our future together? You know, Bryant, the problem isn't that you're too busy at work, it's that you're not even at home. After an argument, she told me this: your body is back, but your mind is still on those rocks and data. I tried to change, requested more office work and reduced field frequency. But the company's reorganization has made it all the more complicated. Last year, I was transferred to a new project that required me to be in charge of the initial exploration of a newly discovered oil field in the Gulf of Mexico. This means longer periods of time away from home, usually 3 weeks away and 1 week at home. Meredith has been amazingly cool about it. If it's important to your career, go for it. I'll be here for you. I should have noticed the detachment in her words at the time, but I was too focused on the challenges of my new project. It was during this time that everything began to change quietly. I came home to find a few new things in the house: new dishes, artwork in the living room, even sheets in the bedroom. Meredith explained it was a perk of a home show she was involved in planning. I didn't think much of it. It wasn't until 3 months ago that things became obvious. I returned home a week early from my job in the Gulf of Mexico and wanted to surprise Meredith. But to my surprise, the house was empty, even though it was already 10 o'clock at night. I called her, and she said she was working late for an important client and would be back soon. That night when she came back, I noticed an unfamiliar cologne smell on her. Also, her lipstick was a little spent and her hair wasn't as neat as usual. But she explained that she had just finished a long planning session, and again I chose to believe it. Over the next few weeks, I started paying attention to more details. Meredith's cell phone suddenly had a new password. She often received late-night work texts. There was a sudden increase in emergency meetings on the weekends, and she was noticeably cooler to our intimacy. All of these signs point to a fact that I hate to admit. But the real turning point happened about a month ago. I was organizing my closet when I accidentally found a business card from a strange man wedged in one of Meredith's notebooks. Flint Harlow, an architectural designer. On the back of the business card, in Meredith's handwriting, is a time and the name of a hotel. That afternoon, I sat in the lobby of that hotel and watched my wife walk intimately into the elevator with that man. Instead of going up and questioning, I left in silence. In the days that followed, I began a covert investigation and discovered that Flint had entered Meredith's life 6 months earlier. They initially met at an architectural design forum that she curated and have been secretly dating ever since. Once I had gathered enough evidence, I planned to confront Meredith directly, but fate gave me an unexpected twist. The very weekend I was going to show my cards, Meredith spoke up first. "Bryant, we need to talk." After dinner, she put down her glass of wine and sounded unusually serious. I put down my knife and fork, my heart beating violently. "I'm listening. I don't know how to say this." Her eyes were on the tablecloth, avoiding my gaze. "But I think our marriage has come to an end." Even though I had prepared myself internally, hearing those words in person was still like a punch in the gut. "Is it because of Flint?" I asked directly. Her eyes snapped up and she looked at me in shock. "You know, I'm not stupid, Meredith." The ensuing conversation was full of accusations, defenses, and tears. She said I was never really emotionally invested in the marriage. I blamed her for betraying our vows. Eventually, she made a request that I didn't expect. "Flint wants to move in," she said calmly. "I want you to move out." I felt a ridiculous giggle. "You cheated on me and you want me out of my own house. Half of this house is mine. And besides," she paused, "don't you travel a lot? You could get an apartment and it wouldn't really change your life that much." It was at that moment that a plan began to form in my mind. Instead of bursting into a rage, as she expected, I was surprisingly calm. "Well," I said finally, "since you've made your decision, I won't force it. Give me a week to unpack." She was obviously surprised and even a little disturbed by my reaction. But soon her expression turned to one of relief. "Thank you for understanding. We can handle the divorce in a civilized manner." That week, I acted like a failed husband who had completely accepted reality, quickly packed up the necessary items, and told Meredith that I had found a temporary home. She didn't even ask me exactly where I lived, and that lack of concern rather made my plan easier. Because just the day before our conversation, I learned that the house next door was for sale. It was a detached house almost identical to ours, separated only by a fence and a small patch of garden. The homeowners were an elderly couple who decided to move to Florida to live with their children. I immediately contacted the realtor and made an offer of 10% above market value on the condition of a quick closing and confidential buyer information. With my years of savings and some investment income, I had enough money to make a full purchase. In 3 days, the house is mine. The day I moved out of my original home, Meredith didn't even walk me to the door. And Flint's car was already parked in the driveway as he helped her carry his luggage into my home. I drove off as if nothing had happened, made a big circle to make sure no one was following me, and then crept back and into my new digs, the house next door. From my bedroom window, I can see directly into my original home, including the master bedroom, living room, and backyard. This perspective gave me the opportunity to observe like never before. For the first week, I recorded Meredith and Flint's every move, when they left the house, when they came back, what they were doing around the house, and even what they were talking about, thanks to modern technology and the audio monitoring techniques I learned on one of my geological expeditions. Flint, I learned, is a 35-year-old architect who is a little-known name in the industry and specializes in designing sustainable commercial buildings. He had an artist's demeanor, a slender build, ever so meticulously groomed blonde-brown hair, and the kind of conversational style that made people feel listened to. I can understand why Meredith was attracted to him. He seemed to have everything I lacked: a steady on-the-ground presence, the ability to listen, and an eye for those little details in life. But as I looked deeper, I began to notice some incongruities. Flint's frequent phone calls about project delays and budgetary issues, Meredith's complaints about his stubbornness and unrealistic perfectionism, and their intimacy seemed more superficial than I expected, more like playing the role of the perfect couple than a real emotional exchange. Just yesterday, I heard a particularly interesting conversation. Meredith was questioning Flint about why his design firm was slow to give him more responsibility for the project. They said my design was too idealistic and not cost-effective enough. There was frustration in Flint's voice. Then why not make some concessions? Meredith asks. Sometimes the perfect is the enemy of the good. You don't understand. His tone suddenly became sharp. I will not compromise my design philosophy for commercial gain. If they don't see my value, it's their loss. A moment of silence ensued, and then Meredith said something meaningful. Sometimes I think you're more obsessed with architecture than you are with our relationship. Even more interestingly, this morning I saw Flint leaving the house in a hurry, apparently because of some sort of argument with Meredith. Meredith, meanwhile, was sitting in the kitchen, staring at her cell phone screen for a long time, as if she were contemplating some important decision. All of this information was carefully recorded in my notebook and formed the basis of my revenge plan. Yes, revenge. I wasn't going to just let it go. Not out of a fantasy of saving the marriage, but for a sense of balance, a sense of justice. While they're enjoying their new life in my house, I'm going to make sure they pay the price. My program does not involve violence or direct confrontation. On the contrary, it's more subtle, the word I want to use is poetic. I would use the information I had and my unique position as an invisible neighbor to gradually dismantle their seemingly perfect relationships and lives. The first step has already been implemented. 2 days ago, I anonymously sent a detailed analysis to Flint's design firm pointing out several safety hazards in a commercial center project he's currently in charge of, all discovered by listening to his phone calls and reviewing the public materials I could find. This afternoon, I noticed that he took a lengthy phone call, and when the call was over, he looked unusually nervous and even broke a glass. With Meredith, my plan was more subtle. I know that the success of her career relies heavily on her perfect image and connections in the business world, and a dishonorable affair, especially if it is revealed in some public but not directly traceable to me, would be a considerable blow to her reputation. I put down my laptop and picked up the binoculars again. Meredith and Flint are now in the living room and appear to be having a serious conversation. Flint's gestures become more and more agitated, while Meredith maintains that stubborn expression I've come to know so well. Chin slightly raised, eyes slightly narrowed. I smiled and lowered the binoculars. It's just getting started. From the house next door, to be exact, I will witness and guide the disintegration of their relationship, little by little, as inevitable as the weathering and stripping of geological layers. And for those of you who may think I'm sick or too extreme, let me just say this. You can't really understand the depth of this betrayal until your spouse moves into your house with a lover and asks you to leave. My response, in a sense, could even be seen as a form of restraint. As night falls, I close the windows and draw the curtains. Tomorrow will be the next phase of the program. And Meredith and Flint, they didn't even know the storm was coming. Early in the morning, the sunlight streams through the blinds and casts streaks of shadow on the floor. I woke up early, prepared a cup of black coffee, and sat down at my desk to start the day's work. Last night's altercation seems to have had some effect on the lovebirds next door. Flint's car is out of the driveway, and Meredith has paradoxically delayed leaving the house, checking her cell phone several times. I gently rubbed the rim of my coffee cup, reflecting on the transformation of the past few weeks. From a respected husband, to a loser who was banished from his own home, to now, a mastermind hiding in the shadows. This shift in roles is sometimes foreign to myself. There was a time when all I had for Meredith was love and commitment, and now a cold resolve fills me. It's not just about revenge. No, it's more like a balance that needs to be restored. When your entire life, your marriage that you thought was solid, falls apart overnight, you don't just lose a relationship, you lose your basic trust in life. Every memory becomes a question. Was it real? Was she already thinking of someone else at the time? Were those wonderful moments we shared just an illusion of her patiently waiting for a better option? I pulled out my cell phone and looked through our old pictures. On that trip to the Grand Canyon 2 years ago, Meredith's smile looked so real in the afterglow of the sunset. Did she really love me then? Or have you already begun to feel dissatisfied with our relationship? I can never be sure anymore, and this uncertainty, this revisiting of the past, is the most torturous of all. Today is an important day in the implementation of the program. I turned on my computer, logged into an anonymous email account, and began composing an email. This email will be sent to several key clients of Meredith's firm and will cover some of the remarks I've picked up from the wiretaps about how she's evaluating these clients behind their backs. Regarding these listening devices, I'm not ashamed or concerned about it. Before my last business trip away from home, I had begun to suspect Meredith's behavior and installed several small audio receivers in my home. These devices were recommended by a security expert I met on a prospecting trip to monitor sound changes in remote areas. They're small enough to hide behind bookshelves, lamps, and murals, and transmit signals wirelessly to my receiver At the time, I was just trying to confirm my suspicions, not gather evidence of retaliation. Now, these devices became a key tool in my revenge program. Of course, I'm aware that this is an illegal gray area. But in the city of Houston, the lines of the law seem to blur when your wife takes a lover and commandeers your house. I didn't hack into their private electronic devices, just utilized equipment I had pre-installed in my own house. It may be less legal, but on my moral scale, it's far lighter than betrayal of a marriage. After writing the email, I didn't send it immediately. Revenge requires patience and strategy, and timing is crucial. I saved the draft and planned to send it the night before Meredith's next big meeting. Thus, when she walked into the conference room the next day full of confidence, her world had begun to quietly fall apart. Inevitably, I thought back to the first time Meredith and I met. Her confidence and radiant smile at that moment immediately drew me in. I was amazed at the focus and understanding she showed when we talked about the oil fields and geology. Few people truly understand the complexity and importance of my work. And now that understanding seems so distant, as if it happened to another person. In the meantime, I need more info on Flint. Through social media and professional network searches, I've learned that he's not infallible in the city's design scene. There are rumors of structural problems with some of his early projects, and his current firm has given him mixed reviews. But I need more specific, stronger material. Houston's architectural scene is not as big as it seems. As an oil industry professional, I've come into contact with a number of architects and engineers involved in the construction of oil field infrastructure. Through a few well-placed emails and phone calls pretending to be potential clients interested in sustainable building, I've begun to gather key information about Flint's career. Just as I was thinking about my next move, the doorbell rang. I froze. No one knows I live here, or at least no one should. I moved gently to the window and carefully plucked back a corner of the curtain. Standing in the doorway was a middle-aged woman in a neat suit who looked like a professional. She's not Meredith or anyone I know. I hesitated for a moment and decided to open the door. Worst-case scenario, I can pretend to be a new tenant moving in. "Hello," I said as I opened the door, keeping a friendly but slightly puzzled expression. "Good morning," she smiled. "I'm Regina Talbot, the neighborhood realtor. I saw someone moving in and thought I'd stop by to say hello and leave my card in case you need any information about the neighborhood." I sighed in relief and took her card. "Thank you. I'm Bryant. Just moved here not long ago. Alone in a house this size?" she asked curiously. "For the time being," I replied vaguely. "The nature of my work requires frequent moves." She nodded, seeming to accept the explanation. Then, her gaze went over my shoulder and into the house. I knew I had to end this conversation quickly. "I'm working remotely, so," I hinted. Of course," she said with immediate understanding. "If you have any questions, feel free to contact me. There are a lot of great amenities in the neighborhood that I'd be happy to introduce you to." I thanked her again and closed the door. This unexpected visit reminded me that I need to be more careful. While my plan is not illegal, too many curious glances may create unnecessary complications. However, Regina's business card gave me an unexpected inspiration. As a realtor, she probably knew Meredith, or at least had some inside knowledge of the industry. Maybe I can get some useful information from her by pretending to be interested in investment properties as a new resident. I jotted the idea down in my notebook and continued my observations. Meredith finally left the house around noon, looking decidedly more tired and distracted than usual. And Flint's car still hasn't returned, which is unusual. According to my records, he's not usually gone all day. In the afternoon, I decided to venture out and head to a nearby cafe. It was partly for a change of scenery and partly to see if I could bump into someone who might know Meredith or Flint. In small communities, gossip is often the most accessible source of information. The cafe wasn't crowded, so I picked a corner seat and ordered an espresso and a sandwich. Limestone Brew is a niche cafe in Houston's business district that attracts professionals for its privacy and quality coffee. I chose this place on purpose because, as far as I could tell, it was frequented by Meredith's employees and was only a few blocks from her office. It's a typical day in Houston. Outside the window, the muggy air twists and turns on the asphalt in subtle heat waves. The hum of the air conditioner mixes with soft jazz to create a cozy atmosphere. I opened my laptop and pretended to be working, but I was actually keeping an eye on the conversations around me. Outside, the pace of the city remains hurried. The booming oil industry brought continued prosperity to the city and shaped specific social circles and industry ecologies. Professional reputation and social presence are especially important in such an environment, and this is exactly the kind of vulnerability I plan to exploit. After about 20 minutes, my patience paid off. Two women sat down at a table near me, one of whom I recognized instantly. Leslie Torres, Meredith's marketing director, whom I'd met 2 years earlier at a company Christmas party organized by Meredith. She showed great interest in my career at the time and asked many questions about oil exploration. "So he moved in?" one of them asked, his voice lowered but still clearly audible in the quiet cafe. "Yes, last week," the lady who looked familiar replied. "To be honest, I'm a little surprised Meredith would let him move in so quickly, especially since her husband just moved out." "Does his husband know?" "I think it's known. Meredith says they've been separated for a while and only recently made it official." "But," she hesitated, "as far as I know, Bryant travels a lot, so the term separated is a bit vague. Do you think Flint is serious? I've heard he's had quite a few complicated relationships before." "Who knows? He does have charisma, and Meredith looks mesmerized. But," she lowered her voice, "I've heard he's having some trouble professionally. There seems to have been a problem with that commercial center project he was in charge of, failing a safety inspection." I almost laughed out loud. Looks like my anonymous tip has had an effect. Really? That's not good. Does Meredith know? I'm not sure. She seemed a little distracted lately, but who can blame her? Divorce, a new relationship, and stress at work. Their conversation continued, but gradually turned to other topics. However, I have gotten some valuable information. Flint is indeed in professional trouble, and Meredith may not be fully aware of the situation. That's one thing I can use. After returning to the house next door, I stood in front of the window and watched the sky turn from bright blue to deep twilight. Houston evenings always come slowly and suddenly, just like the changes in my life. I pondered the meaning of that conversation in the cafe. On the one hand, I felt a twisted sense of satisfaction that the cracks in Meredith and Flint's perfect romance were showing. On the other hand, hearing someone else say such things about Meredith still made me feel a strange sense of protectiveness, even though she'd betrayed me. This conflicting feeling bothers me. Am I seeking revenge, or do I still wish to protect her in some way? Maybe both. Maybe revenge wasn't just about hurting them. It was also about proving something. Proving that our marriage was once real, that my dedication wasn't in vain, that I wasn't just a supporting character who could be replaced at will. I jotted these thoughts down in my notebook and then continued to watch the house across the street. Later in the evening, I noticed that Flint's car had finally returned, but strangely, he didn't enter the house immediately. He sat in the car for a long time, his head leaning against the steering wheel like he was on the phone or deep in some kind of thought. His body language revealed great stress and frustration. Eventually, he picked up a briefcase and hurried into the house, as if he had made up his mind somehow. The house next door, my house, lit up. Through the window, I could see Meredith preparing dinner in the kitchen and Flint pacing back and forth in the living room, her cell phone pressed to her ear. obviously engaged in a heated conversation. Their interactions seemed tense and distant, a far cry from the hot couple of a few days ago. I used to think their relationship was based purely on passion and novelty, but now I'm beginning to suspect there are other factors. Perhaps part of Flint's attraction to Meredith comes from his professional status and social standing. And as these elements are threatened, their relationship begins to falter. During the night, through the listening device I installed, I captured a key conversation. These small receivers have been cleverly hidden by me in unassuming locations in ordinary-looking lamp base, a decorative box on a bookshelf, or even the pot of Meredith's favorite monarch orchid. None of these places will be moved or discarded willy-nilly. The signal is transmitted directly to my dedicated receiver, and with a few simple adjustments, the sound is clearly audible. They said the design needed to be overhauled. Flint's voice was full of frustration, which meant at least 3 months of extra work with no extra pay. But it's your responsibility, isn't it? There was a hint of accusation in Meredith's tone. If the safety standards aren't being met, then they have to be revised. You don't understand. Flint became defensive. These standards change often and are too strict. My designs have passed in many other cities. It's just that the inspections here are particularly harsh. You need to fix this anyway, Meredith insisted. You can't let the whole project be put on hold because of it. Of course I know. Flint's voice suddenly raised and then quickly lowered. I'm sorry, I'm just stressed. The company is already hinting that if this project fails, my position may not be secure. This conversation was followed by a moment of silence, then the sound of a door closing and footsteps. It seems Flint has chosen to leave the room for now rather than continue this unpleasant conversation. I turned off the listening device and noted the information with satisfaction. Flint's career crisis is worse than I expected, which means he's under extreme stress. And stress often leads to mistakes, leading to more cracks in his relationship with Meredith. At midnight, I sat in a recliner in my backyard and looked up at the Houston night sky polluted by city lights. A few still visible stars twinkled in the darkness, reminding me of those nights spent in remote oil fields when the stars were so vast and bright. Often alone, I watched the stars with my telescope, looking for patterns and connections that I might have missed in my geologic explorations. Now, I use the same observation and patience to plan my next move. Tomorrow, I plan to launch the next phase of my revenge plan, contacting Regina, the enthusiastic realtor, and learning more about Meredith's situation in the industry through her. As a realtor, Regina is bound to know every aspect of the local community, including who is buying and selling homes, who is renovating and building, and who has commissioned design work. She may know some inside information about the Flint program, or at least be able to introduce me to those in the know. I had an identity ready to go, an energy consultant who had just moved to Houston and was interested in investing in real estate, and specifically wanted to learn how to incorporate sustainable design into real estate investments. The identity was authentic enough. I do work in the energy industry, after all, and natural enough to steer the conversation toward Flint's area of expertise. In the meantime, I'll continue to increase the pressure on Flint. I've drafted an anonymous email to send to his employer and a few key clients. The email does not directly accuse him of unprofessional behavior, but rather raises some questions and concerns about his current project in a concerned tone, especially about how the character he displays in his personal life may be affecting professional judgment. I specifically mentioned how he intervened in a marriage that had not yet ended and how that behavior might reflect his attitude toward commitment and work ethic. In an industry that relies on trust and long-term collaboration, such as architectural design, personal integrity is often inextricably linked to professional reputation. From my research, I understand that Flint's design office is in a period of expansion, trying to attract some high-end commercial clients. These conservative corporate clients often place a high value on the personal image and ethical standards of the designers they work with. Any negative information about Flint's private life, even if only hinted at, could cast a shadow over his career prospects. And with Meredith, my plan was more subtle. Her career relies heavily on her connections and reputation in Houston's social and business circles. A planning consultant needs absolute trust in order to be commissioned by a client. If she is perceived as someone who can't keep her marital promises, then her clients may begin to question whether she can keep her business promises. In a city like Houston, professional reputation and social presence are often the lifeblood of people's careers. I, on the other hand, am preparing to cut off this lifeline to Meredith and Flint little by little. Of course, I am not without self-reflection. In the stillness of the long night, I had to admit that I had fallen short in my marriage. My work does take up too much time and energy, and even when I'm at home, my mind often drifts to all that geological data and exploration reports. I didn't give Meredith enough emotional support and understanding to really listen to her needs and concerns. But these reflections have not weakened my resolve. Betrayal is betrayal, no matter what the excuse. She could have chosen to face the problem head-on, opted for a divorce, and then started a new relationship on the bright side. But she chose to cheat, chose to make me a fooled husband, and ultimately demanded that I give up the home we shared as if I were the one who had done the wrong thing. It's late at night, but my work is just beginning. From the house next door, I will continue my observations and plans, patiently waiting for the perfect time to make those who betrayed me pay the price they deserve. In the moonlight, my shadow stretched across the lawn like a silent warning. Tomorrow, the storm will begin to brew. They, on the other hand, hadn't even realized they were in the eye of the hurricane. I put away the binoculars and took one last look at the light in the next bedroom. They thought they had won. They thought this story was over. But the truth is, this story is just beginning. And I, Bryant Myers, will make sure this story ends my way. Over the next 2 weeks, Houston's weather gradually shifted from the warmth of October to the coolness of November. The leaves begin to change color, and there is a scent of change in the air. The change is not just a shift in seasons, but also coincides with an event that I am orchestrating. I'm making steady progress on my program. First, I contacted Regina, the enthusiastic realtor. I asked her for information about the local real estate market and specifically mentioned my interest in sustainable building. I've heard of a designer named Flint Harlow who does a good job of that. I mentioned, pretending not to notice. Do you know him? Regina reacted just as I expected. Oh, Flint, she nodded. He does have some interesting projects. But, she hesitated, there seems to be some trouble lately. Trouble? I feigned surprise. There were some problems with a commercial center project he was in charge of, and he failed a safety inspection. She lowered her voice as if sharing a secret. It's all over the construction world. Oh, that's a shame, I responded. I hope it won't affect his career too much. Who knows? Regina shrugged. But he's also been a bit private lately. Complicated. Private life? I pretended to be curious. He moved in with a woman who's not yet divorced, she said. And I'm not supposed to gossip about my clients, but it's no secret in the neighborhood. That house is right next door to you, actually. I feigned surprise while feeling a surge of satisfaction. It seemed the community was already talking about Meredith and Flint's relationship. The seeds have been planted, now they just need to be allowed to take root. The next day, I launched the next phase of the program. I sent several well-crafted emails anonymously, one to the head of Flint's design firm, suggesting that his personal life might be affecting the firm's image, and another to one of Meredith's key clients, subtly suggesting that her recent private decisions might reflect a problem with her professional judgment. The emails are vague enough to not be considered outright defamatory, but specific enough to raise the recipient's alarm and suspicion. Just like in oil exploration, sometimes you don't need to know exactly where the reservoir is. Just drill in the right place and let the pressure do the rest of the work itself. During the evening, I observed Flint take a lengthy phone call, at the end of which he broke a glass and became visibly agitated. Meredith, on the other hand, came home 2 hours later than usual with a stony expression on her face. Their dinner was spent in silence, with little communication. Through the listening device, I captured a key conversation. The company asked me to leave the ongoing project for a while. Flint's voice was full of frustration. They said they needed to reevaluate the team composition. Is it because of the security clearance thing? Meredith asked. It's not just that, he paused. The boss alluded to receiving a complaint about my personal life choices as potentially affecting the company's image. What? This is ridiculous. Meredith's voice rose. Who cares about your personal life? Obviously, some important clients are concerned, Flint says bitterly. They are conservative family businesses that value the ethical standards of those they work with. The silence lasted for a moment, then Meredith said softly, I had something strange happen to me today, too. The Hendricks Group abruptly canceled next week's meeting, saying they were reconsidering their event planning needs. The Hendricks Group is one of Meredith's largest clients. I know what this news means to her. These things can't be coincidences, Flint said, skepticism in his voice. Do you think? Could it be Bryant? My heart is racing. They're getting suspicious. Bryant? Meredith's voice showed surprise. No, he's not like that. Besides, he's gone and we don't even know where he lives. But it all happened after I moved in, Flint insisted. Maybe he's more vindictive than we thought. Even if he wanted to retaliate, he wouldn't know how to affect our work, Meredith argued, though a hint of uncertainty had crept into her tone. It could just be coincidence. I smiled as I jotted down the conversation. The seed of doubt had been sown, and it didn't need me to do anything. It would grow on its own and eventually destroy the trust between them. Over the next few days, I continued my observations and notes. Flint starts going out more often, apparently looking for new job opportunities. Meredith works late into the night trying to win back lost clients. Their interactions with each other were becoming less and less rigid. In the meantime, I learned more about Flint through Regina. It turns out he had a failed marriage precisely because his ex-wife thought he was putting his job ahead of his relationship. This information gave me a new thought. It could be used to increase Meredith's insecurity. I started the next phase of the program. I signed up for a fake social media account, pretending to be an architectural insider, and began to raise technical questions about Flint's design philosophy on various professional forums. These challenges were sufficiently specialized that they required Flint to spend a great deal of time and effort responding and defending itself. Meanwhile, I anonymously contributed an article to an industry news site analyzing several recent construction projects with safety issues, including the one Flint was responsible for. The article itself maintains objectivity, but skillfully juxtaposes Flint's project with other, more problematic cases, leaving the reader with the impression that his design was fundamentally flawed. All of this is gradually dismantling Flint's professional confidence and market value, which is a core part of his identity. With Meredith, my strategy was more subtle. Through some of my contacts in the oil industry, I started spreading some rumors about how she might be on the verge of losing an important client. In business social circles, expectations often turn into reality. If people think an event planner is losing clients, they begin to question whether they should continue to work with her. I also managed to get Regina to mention, off the record, to Meredith that she'd heard Flint was privately checking out apartments downtown. It's a complete lie, but it's enough to raise Meredith's hackles and suspicions. This double whammy against their respective weaknesses is beginning to show results. Through the listening device, I caught them arguing with each other more and more frequently, and the topic quickly shifted from job stress to questioning their commitment to each other. "You spend all day at your job," Meredith accused one night. "Like you don't care about our relationship." "I'm busy trying to save my career," Flint shot back. "And you? You yourself spend all your time trying to win back clients." "Because I need to work to make ends meet. The mortgage on this house won't pay itself." "Ah, so now it's about money?" Flint's voice was tinged with sarcasm. "Maybe life does get easier when your husband covers all the expenses." There was a moment of silence, then Meredith's icy response. "Maybe I made a mistake." "Which mistake?" Flint questioned. There was another silence. I could almost imagine the look of struggle on Meredith's face, the kind of look I had seen during our last argument. "Nothing," she said finally. "I'm tired, go to bed." But Flint didn't follow her upstairs. He stayed in the living room long enough for me to see him sitting in the dark, the light from his cell phone screen illuminating his tired face. Watching this scene, I felt a complex sense of satisfaction. It wasn't just the thrill of revenge. It was also a strange relief seeing Meredith and Flint's relationship expose the same problems, as our marriage somehow proved that the problem wasn't all me. 3 weeks later, the situation deteriorated dramatically. Flint's design firm formally terminated his contract, citing a change in company direction. In fact, I know it's because of the security issues I anonymously reported, combined with rumors about his private life, that made the company feel like he became a liability. That same day, Meredith lost 2 of her biggest clients. One directly expressed concern about the quality of her recent work, while the other euphemistically mentioned the issue of fit with company values. Later that night, they broke out into a heated argument so loud that I could hear most of it without the need for a listening device. "This is all because of you," Meredith screamed. "If you would have compromised a little and not been so stubborn, maybe you wouldn't have lost your job." "Oh, so now it's all my fault." Flint shot back. "What about you? Why are all your customers suddenly unhappy?" "Maybe it's because you put too much energy into interfering with my design decisions. I try to help you, but you never take any advice, like—" She stopped abruptly. "Like what?" Flint pressed. "Like Bryant? Is that all you have to say? There's that name again. My name appears in their quarrels like a ghost that keeps coming back to haunt them." "No," Meredith's voice suddenly grew tired. "I don't want to bring him into this. It's about us, Flint. About our relationship and our future." "Is there a future?" Flint asked coldly. "Look at us, Meredith. 2 months ago, we were thinking about how we were going to renovate this house, and now we can barely even keep our jobs." Flint didn't sleep in the master bedroom that night. I saw the living room light on all night, and the next morning he left the house with a suitcase and didn't come back for 3 whole days. Meredith seems to be falling apart. She called in sick and stayed home all day, often crying on the phone and pouring out her plight to friends. By listening in on her conversations, I learned that she was beginning to question her decision and whether her relationship with Flint was worth the price she was paying. "I don't know, Lisa," she said to her friend on the other end of the line. Her voice choked. "Maybe it was all a mistake. Maybe I should try to contact Bryant and at least apologize." I felt a strange sense of emptiness when I heard those words. That's what I want, isn't it? To see her regret, to see her admit her mistakes. But why did it give me such a short-lived sense of satisfaction? The final phase of the program began on a Friday evening. After nearly a month of careful planning and execution, Meredith and Flint's relationship is on shaky ground, and both of their careers have been hit hard. Now it's time for them to know the source of it all. I chose a night when they were all home. Through the window, I saw them in the kitchen, preparing dinner in silence, the atmosphere between them tense and distant. It's perfect timing. I put on a dark blue shirt, Meredith's favorite one I wore, and walked out of the house next door and through the little patch of garden between us. The roses in the garden have faded to dry branches, just like our marriage. I rang the doorbell and waited. The door opened and Meredith stood there, shock, then confusion, and finally a strange sort of relief on her face when she saw me, as if she had somehow been waiting for this moment. "Bryant." Her voice was almost a whisper. "Hello, Meredith," I said calmly. "May I come in? I think it's time we had a little talk." She hesitated, then sidled up to let me in my own house. The decor inside has changed a bit, but the basic layout remains the same. Flint stood in the kitchen doorway, her face wary and hostile. "What do you want?" he asked directly. "Just talking," I responded, a controlled calmness in my voice, "about everything that's happened in the last few weeks." "What do you mean?" Meredith asked, visibly disturbed. I looked around and noticed the pot of monarchs in the corner of the living room, which hid one of my listening devices. I smiled slightly, then looked Meredith straight in the eye. "Have you ever wondered why you guys suddenly started getting into all kinds of trouble? Why is Flint's design being questioned, and why are your customers starting to leave?" They exchanged a wary look. "Did you do this?" Flint asked, disbelief in his voice. "That's impossible. How do you know about my work?" "Just like how I knew Meredith had lost the Hendricks Group as a client," I replied calmly. "Just like how I knew what you guys were arguing about recently." Meredith's face turned pale. "You've been spying on us." "No," I corrected. "I've been watching." From there, I pointed out the window, and the house next door was clearly visible. "You live next door?" Meredith asks, shocked. Since the day you asked me to leave my own house." I finished her sentence. "Yes." Flint looks both angry and confused. "This is crazy. Why are you doing this?" I laughed, a laugh that carried no warmth. "Why? What do you think I should have done when my wife and her lover commandeered my house and demanded I leave? Just go away in silence and wish you all the happiness in the world." "We can settle this civilly," said Meredith, her voice trembling. "There's no need for this revenge." "Civilization?" I repeated. "As civilized as you treat me? Cheating on me behind my back and then asking me to move out of my own home." "We could have discussed dividing the property," Meredith argued, "and you could have been fairly compensated." "It was never about money," I said, my voice suddenly sharp. "It was about respect, about honesty, about commitment. Do you think I care about things that can be measured in money? The room was silent for a moment, only the ticking of the clock echoing. So you planned all this? Flint eventually asked. The anonymous tip, the loss of clients, those negative comments about my designs? Not really, I admitted. But I did give things a push. The truth is that there was something inherently wrong with your relationship, and I just sped up the process of exposing it. Meredith sat down slowly, as if her legs could no longer support her. Why are you telling us? She asked softly. You could have remained anonymous. That's a good question. Why? Maybe it's because I want to see the look on their faces when they're confronted with the truth. Maybe it's because at some point I need to end it all and seek some kind of relief for myself. Because revenge isn't the goal, I finally replied. Knowing the truth is. I want you to know that every choice has consequences and every betrayal has a price. Flint suddenly became angry. You have no right to interfere in our lives. It's sick. Sick? I asked rhetorically. Which is sicker than betraying a marriage, taking over someone's home, and then pretending to be a victim? Meredith looked up with tears in her eyes. What are you going to do? Keep this up? I took a deep breath and felt a strange calm. No, after tonight, I'm done. I've arranged for a realtor to come tomorrow to evaluate the house next door, my new house. I'm going to sell it and leave the city. You're leaving? There was a hint of emotion in Meredith's voice that I couldn't identify. Was it relief or was it regret? Yes, I nodded. But before we leave, I want to make sure you understand what happened and why. I took a flash drive out of my pocket and put it on the coffee table. It contains all the information I've gathered, transcripts of your conversations, actions I've taken, and a complete analysis of the failure of our marriage. Maybe someday, when you guys calm down and can look at it all objectively, it will be helpful. Flint snorted, but Meredith stared at the flash drive silently, as if it contained some precious truth. You know, I continued, my tone becoming softer. What's ironic is that the problems you're facing right now are almost identical to the ones that caused our marriage to fail. The balance between professional and personal life, the lack of communication, the mismatch of expectations. History always repeats itself in different ways. I stood up and got ready to leave. That's all I wanted to say. The divorce papers are ready. My attorney will contact you. As for the house, I won't fight for it. I've got what I need. As I walked toward the door, Meredith spoke suddenly. Bryant. Her voice was unusually fragile. I'm so sorry. Not for the events of the last few weeks, but for my betrayal. I should have been more direct and honest about our problems. I stopped but didn't turn around. Me too, I replied softly. I should be more focused on our relationship, not just our future. Then I opened the door and walked out into the Houston night. As the door closed behind me, I felt a strange relief, as if a weight had been lifted from my shoulders. Back at the house next door, my temporary home, I stood at the window and looked across at the lights. Meredith and Flint are still standing in the living room, seemingly in a heated discussion about something. What their future holds, I no longer care. My plan for revenge was complete, but the feeling of victory was unusually hollow. 2 months later, I was standing in the departure lounge of the Houston airport, waiting for my flight to Alaska. The company offered me a leadership position on a new project responsible for the exploration of a newly discovered oil field near the Arctic Circle. This is a major career advancement and a fresh start. The house next door has sold for 15% more than when I purchased it. The original house, mine and Meredith's, is also supposedly listed for sale. Regina told me that Meredith and Flint had broken up and each moved away. Flint found a new job in Seattle, while Meredith decided to stay in Houston and rebuild her career and reputation. The divorce has been finalized and the property has been divided. On paper, our marriage is officially over. But in a way, it didn't really end until I stepped on that plane. As the plane traveled through the clouds, I watched through the window as Houston grew smaller and eventually disappeared over the horizon. I thought of the house next door, of all those nights of observation and recording, of every detail of the revenge plan. It was all once so important, so urgent, but now they are just fragments of memory, fading images. From my seat, I pulled out the notebook where I had recorded everything. For months, it had been the centerpiece of my revenge plan, containing every detail, every conversation, every weakness about Meredith and Flint. Now, its mission has been accomplished. I flipped through it one last time and then put it in the pocket in front of my seat, ready to be discarded when I got off the plane. But just as I was about to close the notebook, a sentence on the last page caught my attention. I wrote that late one night. Revenge doesn't bring healing, it only keeps the wound open. Reading that sentence, I realized that this is exactly what has been true for the past few months. My revenge plan did work, but instead of repairing my wounds, it left me dwelling on the past and unable to truly move forward. True relief comes not from getting back at those who hurt us, but from letting go of the past and embracing the possibilities of the future. The plane continued to fly north through increasingly frigid skies. And I, in the end, understood a simple truth. Sometimes the best revenge is not an elaborate retaliation, but living a better, fuller, freer life. When the plane landed on the snowy Alaskan landscape, I knew I was ready. The house next door was a thing of the past, and ahead was a vast, unexplored world waiting to be discovered and understood. Maybe someday, when the hurt is no longer stark, when the memories no longer sting, I will forgive Meredith and myself. But that's another story, one that hasn't been written yet. And now, I just need to focus on the path in front of me, one step at a time. Because in the end, life isn't about what we lose. It's about how we use what's left to create a new, meaningful existence. The house next door taught me this. Sometimes the greatest loss can be the most important turning point. The plane taxied down the snow-covered runway and gradually came to a stop. I put away my notebook and got up, ready to leave. The world outside is bright and cold and full of new possibilities. And that house, the one next door that became the stronghold of my revenge, is thousands of miles away, a new home for another family, the beginning of another story. As for my story, it's just turning over a new leaf. That's the end of today's story. For more captivating tales, hit subscribe and never miss an episode.